Cambria Steele thought she was just going undercover. Turns out she was walking straight into war. A racist client, a hidden CEO, a dealership built on smiles and secrets. They laughed at her, dismissed her, tried to erase her, but she wasn't there to sell cars. She was there to expose everything. What happens when a black woman owns the room and no one sees her coming? Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. You can sell a car with a grin, but you can't sell dignity. The dealership floor gleamed like a stage. Chrome reflected sunlight like it had something to prove. Glass panels framed a fortress built on engine roars and credit scores. But underneath the shine was a hum, quiet, unspoken, familiar to those who've been told to smile more while swallowing pride. On the surface, everything was polished, but underneath the foundation trembled. Shaquille "Big Shaq" O'Neal walked in through the side entrance, not the one with the marble-tiled awning or the velvet-roped VIP welcome sign. He never used that one. He moved quietly, unnoticed, a 6'11" giant who somehow knew how to disappear when he wanted to. That was his way. He didn't need to be seen. He needed to see. He paused behind a column near the employee lounge, observing the early rhythm of the floor. It was a Tuesday, mid-month, the kind of day where salespeople got desperate and masks started slipping. Shaq had watched long enough to know when a man's tone changed based on the customer's skin color. He'd seen the eyebrow raises, the code words, the clipboard handoffs that always happened when a black couple walked through the door and suddenly no one was available to help.
This was his place. Or it was supposed to be.
The dealership bore his name in fine print on shareholder documents and press releases, but not on the building. That was intentional. Let the young hotshots have the spotlight. Shaq believed in quiet power. He believed in lifting others. He'd invested in this place not for ego, but for legacy. Now that legacy was in question. Cambria Steele entered just before 10 a.m., dressed in a modest navy button-down and a pair of work-worn slacks. Her curls were tied up in a tight bun. No designer handbag. No gold earrings. Just a cheap-looking leather purse and a clipboard that might as well have been a disguise. She introduced herself to the front desk girl as Bree Steele, new hire for the floor training. The receptionist didn't even look up, just motioned to the HR office with a flick of her nails. Cambria took a long breath as she stepped inside. 2 weeks ago, an anonymous email landed in her inbox. It had no name, no signature, just a voice. Someone said that the dealership had a culture issue, that black customers were not getting fair financing, that one employee was known for referring to black clients as low credit liabilities in private. The email didn't shock her, but it stirred something deep. Cambria didn't build her career by turning away from ugly truths. As a black woman who climbed through boardrooms without ever being invited in, she learned to listen to whispers. They always told more truth than applause. She didn't announce her plan to Shaq, not at first. She needed to see the cancer before she cut it out. When she finally told him, Shaq didn't argue. He nodded once and said only, "I'll be nearby." Cambria walked into the employee briefing room, clipboard tucked under her arm. A dozen sales reps circled a desk with coffee cups and half-open folders. No one looked up. No one introduced themselves. The sales manager, a tan-skinned man with gel-slicked hair named Devin Klein, finally glanced her way. "View the new floor, girl?" he asked, half-turning. "Yeah," she said softly. "Shadow Grant today. He'll show you the ropes." He pointed at a tall, lean man, sipping from a monogrammed tumbler. Grant looked at her once, up, down, and away. "Sure," he muttered. "Let's go, rookie." Cambria followed without a word. The first client that walked in was an older white man with a slow gait and an oil-stained denim jacket. He walked up to Cambria, smiled politely, and said, "Hey darlin', looking to test that F-150 over there." Before she could respond, Grant stepped between them and said, "She's just training, I can help you." His smile was warm, practiced. The man didn't protest. Cambria stepped back and said nothing. They moved on to a young black couple who walked in holding hands and laughing. The woman wore bright yellow heels. The man had a fresh fade and wore a clean blazer. Cambria stepped toward them, instinctively ready to greet them. Grant stopped her with a light hand on her shoulder. "Let's let Devin take this one. They usually want a deal, and he's better with tough credit cases." Tough credit cases. She swallowed the bile that rose in her throat. She watched as Devin approached them, his smile thinner than before. The couple walked the lot. They left 20 minutes later. No test drive, no handshake, just silence and a faint look of disappointment. Behind the front desk, 2 employees laughed over something on a phone. One of them nudged the other. "Look at Chad trying to sell to that guy. He's probably asking if we take EBT." They laughed harder. Cambria clenched her clipboard. Lunchtime came. She sat alone outside near the employee smoking section. No one joined her. No one asked how her day was going. She listened instead, heard snippets through open doors. I don't know why they send trainees like that. She's not gonna last. She probably got the job 'cause of a quota. She ain't sales material. She's better off in admin. Cambria bit into her sandwich and chewed slow, letting the bitterness burn before she swallowed it. Later that day, she saw Shaq in the distance, leaning against a far pillar, arms crossed, baseball cap pulled low. He nodded at her once. She nodded back. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The rest of the day blurred into a steady rhythm of subtle digs and invisible lines. Grant ignored her suggestions. Devon passed her off to another rep, who needed help organizing paperwork. A woman named Courtney told her, "You're gonna want to keep your head down here. Just smile and follow Grant. He does most of the heavy lifting." Smile. Follow. Stay quiet. Cambria went home and stared in the mirror. She saw herself, but also saw the face of every woman who'd ever been dismissed with a handshake. Every mother told she didn't qualify. Every voice that cracked trying to stay calm under scrutiny. She opened a folder and began writing. Not as a CEO, but as a witness. Back at the dealership, Shaq sat in his glass-walled office, watching the floor below. He saw what they didn't think he could see. He saw Cambria fade into shadows they mistook for silence. He saw a system designed to protect comfort over justice. He saw his investment twisted into something unrecognizable. He thought of his mother, Lucille, how she used to say, "Dignity is the one thing no man can take from you unless you hand it over." He wasn't handing anything over. And neither was Cambria. They were just getting started. The first handshake told her everything she needed to know. The morning sun cut through the glass panels like judgment, golden and precise, revealing dust no one wanted to admit was there. Cambria stepped onto the showroom floor in a second-hand blouse and slacks pressed too carefully for someone just starting out. Her shoes squeaked slightly, cheap leather trying to pass for something better. She walked with posture but softened it, careful not to appear like she had too much purpose. That was the trick. Look like you belong just enough to not be questioned, but never so much that you stand out. Not in places like this. Chad Whitmer was the first to greet her. Early 30s, loud, self-styled closer, the kind who talked over customers and coworkers without blinking. His teeth were white from a whitening strip regimen, and his handshake had that extra second too long that made it feel more like a grip than a greeting. "Well, hey there, sweetheart," he said, eyes scanning her. Not like a colleague but a curiosity. "You with us now?" Cambria kept her tone light. "That's the plan." He nodded toward her clipboard. "You'll probably want to shadow someone like Grant or me. We know how to handle our clientele. Some of them can be particular." He winked. The word particular hung in the air like a warning. As Cambria walked past the front desk, the receptionist, a pale woman named Whitney, with a tight blonde bun and a permanent look of polite distraction, barely glanced up. "You filled out your new hire paperwork," she mumbled, tapping her phone screen. "I handed it in yesterday," Cambria replied. "Well, I don't see it in the system," Whitney said without looking, her voice flat. "So maybe double-check with HR again? You know how they are." Cambria nodded, masking the heat behind her eyes. She walked toward the employee lounge, where laughter echoed just loud enough to feel exclusionary. 4 sales reps were huddled around a table. Chad, Grant, a woman named Rebecca with a silk scarf, and a short, muscular man named Joey who never removed his sunglasses, even indoors. Grant raised his coffee cup in mock salute. "So what'd you do before this? Retail? Education? Government job?" he asked Cambria as she stepped into the room. She hesitated a moment. "Logistics. A little of everything." Joey snorted. Translation, bouncing from job to job. Laughter followed. Rebecca offered a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Well, the job's all about confidence, honey. Just find someone who knows how the game works and tag along. You'll pick it up." "Confidence," Cambria repeated quietly. She bit the inside of her cheek and nodded. At noon, she stood next to Grant during a walk-in. A white man in his 50s, wearing a sports jacket and expensive watch, stepped up. Cambria offered her hand instinctively. He blinked at her, then turned to Grant. "You the guy I should talk to?" Grant smirked. "Yes, sir. Let's find you something nice." The customer nodded once and walked right past her, not saying a word. Cambria stood still. She knew what just happened. So did Grant. But he didn't acknowledge it. He simply walked away with the man, gesturing toward a high-end sedan near the window. By 2 p.m., she'd been offered coffee by no one, asked for input by no one. When a black couple entered the dealership, a young woman in medical scrubs and a tall man with work-calloused hands, Cambria subtly moved forward, ready to engage. Grant leaned in beside her. "I'll take this one," he said. "Just keep observing. These folks usually ask about deals and discounts before they even sit in a car." Cambria narrowed her eyes. "What makes you say that?" Grant looked at her sideways. "Trust me. You'll see." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence was a ledger. Every moment today, every word, every sidestep, it was all being logged. Out of sight, Shaq watched from the upstairs office. The windows were tinted, but he could see everything. He saw Cambria straighten her back just slightly after that exchange. He saw the tension across her jaw. Shaq had known racism all his life, but there was something particularly cold about what he saw on this floor. It wasn't name-calling or shouting. It was erasure. The way people looked through her. The way even good people didn't stop it. He thought of Lucille again. Thought of her saying, "They don't gotta beat you to break you. They'll just stop seeing you. That's worse." In the finance office, two male reps chatted between appointments. "You see the new girl?" one said. "Yeah. Wonder how long she'll last. Probably a diversity hire. You know how that goes. Maybe they're trying to look good for corporations. We're getting audited next month, right? Doesn't matter. She'll quit in a week once she realizes no one's handing her clients." Cambria passed by just as the door cracked open. She didn't stop walking, but she heard every word. After closing time, she sat alone in her car in the far corner of the dealership lot. The sun had dipped behind the trees, and the only light left was the flickering glow of the security sign. Her hands sat idle in her lap. She didn't cry. That wasn't her style, but her silence was heavy. She thought of the young black couple who left without so much as a brochure in their hands. She thought of the way Grant looked past her, of Whitney ignoring her paperwork, of Chad's patronizing smirk. It wasn't one thing, it was all of it. A culture written in passing phrases and quiet choices. And she thought of Shaq. He hadn't spoken to her all day, but once when she'd looked up from the customer seating area, she caught him watching, just for a moment. He nodded, not just in approval, but in understanding. This wasn't just observation anymore. It was documentation. It was evidence. The next morning, Cambria arrived 20 minutes early. She wore the same slacks, the same blouse. She didn't change a thing, but she carried something new. A small black voice recorder tucked into the bottom of her bag, and a second one sewn into her blazer seam. She wasn't going to accuse anyone. She was going to show them to themselves. Shaq met her near the vending machines at 9:45. For the first time since she started, he spoke directly. "You all right?" he asked quietly. She nodded once. "They think I'm invisible." Shaq's voice was low. "Then they're in trouble." Cambria gave a small, tired smile. "Let's see how deep this thing goes." Shaq walked away, blending back into the shadows. Cambria stepped into the break room, where Chad was already telling a story about a customer who didn't speak English but still tried to test drive a Beamer. The others laughed again. Cambria sat down, pulled out her notebook and started writing. The showroom floor looked the same. Same shine, same forced smiles, but everything was different now. She wasn't just the new hire anymore. She was the one they'd regret ignoring. He walked in like he owned the South, and everyone in it. The dealership's entrance door whooshed open like a cue, and the room shifted, subtle but collective. Salesmen straightened ties, managers peeked from their offices, and the receptionist stiffened her smile. That was the reaction Raymond Cutler earned whenever he arrived. Part dread, part opportunity, all profit. He wasn't just a client, he was that client. The kind with generational wealth and a dangerous charm. The kind who thought money meant moral immunity. Raymond Cutler strutted in wearing tan boots that still had dust on them, jeans that cost more than a month's rent, and a crisp white shirt tucked under a camel-colored suede vest. His belt buckle was the centerpiece, a silver Confederate flag gleaming under the showroom lights, unapologetic and deliberate. His voice carried like he owned the building, southern drawl thick enough to drown out discomfort. "Where's that Escalade I saw on the site?" he barked, striding toward the floor with a slow scan of the employees. "Black one, platinum trim, want that exact model." Cambria was nearest. She took 2 steps forward, clipboard in hand, her posture poised but welcoming. "I'd be happy to help you with that, sir. The Escalade is—" Raymond's eyes swept over her like static. He paused, frowned, then chuckled like he'd just heard a joke that wasn't funny. "Nah," he interrupted, waving her off like dust. "Ain't got time for cleaning staff. I need someone who knows real business." His words landed with the precision of a slap. A beat of silence followed. Not confusion, recognition. Everyone heard it. No one moved. Cambria stood still, eyes locked forward. Neither retreating nor engaging. Her fingers curled slightly around the clipboard. A single breath slipped through her nose. Measured. Controlled. Inside her, something seethed. But on her face, only stillness. Grant Dillard was already on the move. He saw the moment and lunged for it, like a hyena circling dropped meat. He stepped between them, extending a hand to Raymond.
Mr. Cutler, welcome back, sir. I can assist you right here, he said, smiling with the eagerness of a man who never passed up a big commission. That Escalade's waiting for you.
Raymond's smirk returned. Now you look like someone who gets it. As they walked off toward the display vehicle, Cambria didn't move. She didn't turn. She just stood there, letting the heat of every gaze touch her back before she exhaled and walked slowly to the far wall. Upstairs, behind a sheet of tinted glass, Shaquille O'Neal watched the entire scene unfold. His jaw clenched so hard the muscles in his neck twitched. His fists curled at his sides, thumbs digging into his palms. He wasn't angry for Cambria because she needed protection. He was angry because she didn't flinch, and that resilience came from a lifetime of being treated as less. He knew that look on her face. He'd seen it on his mother's face after being called gal in a department store. He'd seen it in college teammates who got benched for speaking up. And now he saw it on the CEO of his dealership, standing still so she wouldn't explode. Down below, Grant led Raymond toward the luxury section, trailing fake familiarity. "We just got her in last week," he said. "Fully loaded, cooled seats, adaptive cruise, top-tier audio. Perfect for a man like yourself." Raymond grinned wide, patting the Escalade like it was a hunting dog. "Knew I'd find something I liked here. Only dealership in the state that still treats me like a man." "Appreciate that, Mr. Cutler," Grant said smoothly. "And just so you know, we're offering premium loyalty perks this month. Let me see what I can do for you." Raymond raised a hand. "No need to go digging. I already know the owner. Man's a friend of mine. Told me I could come in any time and get the VIP discount." Grant blinked. "The owner?" Raymond laughed, real hearty this time. "Yeah, big guy. Ex-ball player or something. What's his name again? Shaq something." Cambria, standing a few feet away now by the front counter, turned just enough to catch the moment. Grant hesitated. "You mean Shaquille O'Neal?" "That's the one. Met him at a golf thing a while back. Told me to stop by his place and he'd hook me up, his words. So I expect y'all to follow through." The air shifted. It wasn't embarrassment. Grant had none. But confusion flickered in his eyes. Raymond was swinging his name around like a badge, and the irony dripped thick and fast. Cambria bit her lip gently, the only tell she allowed herself. She scribbled something on her notepad, a single word, hooked. Later that afternoon, while Grant processed Raymond's application, Cambria stepped outside behind the service bay for air. She wasn't shaking. She wasn't spiraling. She was calculating. She replayed Raymond's words in her head. Cleaning staff. Real business. VIP discount. She'd heard them all before. In boardrooms. In banks. In subtle tones. But something about today. Something about being mistaken for someone beneath even recognition. Settled into her chest differently. Shaq met her there. She didn't hear him approach, but she felt the air shift behind her. "I heard it all," he said finally. Cambria turned. "You gonna say something to him?" "No," Shaq said calmly. "I'm gonna let him finish his paperwork, and then I'm gonna let him come in again. Because the next time he walks through that door, he's not getting a car, he's getting clarity." Her eyes met his, and the edges of her mask softened. "You ready?" he asked. "I was born ready," she replied. They didn't need to scheme. They didn't need revenge. They needed exposure. Back inside, Raymond was sipping coffee at the lounge area like he was at a country club. His application was being reviewed by the finance department. Chad was already eyeing the commission possibility. Devin dropped by and offered a handshake and a few forced laughs. Rebecca chimed in with a half-hearted, "Hope you're being taken care of." Raymond smirked and said, "Best service I've had in months. And trust me, I know quality when I see it." Cambria walked by, papers in hand. Raymond didn't even blink at her, just went on bragging about land development deals and tax write-offs. To him, she was invisible, but soon she'd be unforgettable. By closing time, the application was under review. Shaq had pulled a quiet override on the back end. Nothing would be finalized. Raymond left expecting a follow-up call the next day confirming everything. Instead, he'd be getting a formal letter. "We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone not aligned with our organizational values." That evening, Cambria and Shaq sat in the empty conference room. "That belt buckle," Shaq muttered. "I've seen that same symbol on helmets thrown at my head in college. Never thought I'd see it in my own damn showroom." "Racism dresses itself up real pretty these days," Cambria said. calls itself tradition, calls itself Southern pride, but pride doesn't belittle, it doesn't erase, it doesn't dismiss people before they speak. Shaq leaned back, exhaling. He thought you were cleaning staff. And he thinks he knows the owner. They shared a look, no laughter, just quiet understanding. This wasn't just about one man. It was about the silent permissions given every day by coworkers who stayed quiet, by systems that protected profit over people. But that silence was ending. The trap wasn't malicious. It was dignified, deliberate. Let the client come back. Let the whole team watch what happens when a man draped in hate tries to demand privilege and gets met not with rage but truth. Because the next time Raymond Cutler walked through that door, he'd learn what it meant to confuse power with permission. They thought silence was safety, but she wrote it all down. The quiet moments between conversations became the richest. They were the places where truth spilled without consent, where offhand remarks became evidence, where careless jokes turned into nails in a coffin no one saw being built. Cambria learned early in her undercover days that the most damaging behavior didn't come with a raised voice, it came with a chuckle and a wink, spoken just soft enough to think it would vanish. That's when she started the files. Not out of vengeance, not out of pride, but out of a fierce, unshakable need to document, because silence protected them. But records exposed them. She began cataloging everything. The slights, the codes, the rerouted deals, the casual cruelty wrapped in policy. Her phone was always in her pocket, recording app running in the background. A small audio pen clipped to her notebook caught even the whispers in the corner of the staff lounge. Each evening she transferred files to an encrypted folder named Whispers, stored on a separate drive no one could touch. It started with the sales rotation board. On the surface it looked random, a shuffle of names, times, and assigned customers. But Cambria noticed patterns. Certain salespeople, always white, getting premium leads from online submissions. Meanwhile, employees of color, especially newer ones, were routed walk-ins or deals tagged as low priority. She took photos of the board at different hours, logged the changes. Each image told a story of subtle segregation. Then came the recordings. Conversations in the break room, in passing, during lunch runs. You see that woman who came in last week? The one with the 3 kids? You just know she's gonna waste your time asking for monthly payments she can't hit. I gave that couple to Andre. They're more his speed, if you know what I mean. I had to walk a guy through the lease, like he didn't even speak English. Should have just handed him a picture book. Cambria didn't flinch when she heard these things. She pressed record harder. Let the poison flow. These people, these coworkers, weren't slipping up. They were speaking comfortably, freely, because they believed the room was theirs, because they'd never once feared accountability. She began to organize the files by category: sales assignments, client profiling, internal gossip, management behavior. Each audio clip was time-stamped, labeled with initials. It was clinical, methodical, but beneath it all, it was deeply personal. Late one Thursday evening, long after closing, Shaq returned through the back entrance, keys in one hand, duffel bag in the other. He didn't announce himself. He didn't flip on the overheads. He moved like a man searching for a ghost that used to be him, walking among the desks he helped design, pausing at the chairs where his own staff had once laughed with him, not at people like Cambria. He knew the names, the birthdays, the families, or at least he thought he did, but something had changed. Cambria met him in the back office, a folder already waiting on the desk. "These are the latest," she said simply. Shaq opened it slowly, like it might burn his hands. Transcripts, screenshots, clips on labeled USBs. At first he just skimmed. Then he sat down, read the quotes, listened to the audio. His eyes didn't widen, they sank. He heard Devin laugh about how minority buyers always want the top models but come in with subprime credit. He heard Grant say, "Give the Escalade to me, I can talk their language." He heard Courtney tell another staffer, "Look, it's not racist if it's statistically true." Shaq pushed the chair back, ran his hands over his face, and didn't speak for a long time. "This is my fault," he finally said. "No," Cambria replied. "It's not your fault they were like this, but it's your name on the wall." That sentence hit like a punch he wasn't expecting, but he didn't flinch. He stood, walked to the window, and stared out across the dark lot. The rows of polished metal shimmered in the security lights like trophies, but tonight they looked hollow. All those cars sold under smiles he no longer trusted. "When I brought you in," he said, voice low, "I thought I was building something better than the world we came from. I really did." "You were," Cambria answered, "but you handed them the keys." That truth hurt, but it was honest. From that night forward, Shaq became more than a silent observer. He started keeping his own watch, not during peak hours, But late at night, walking through paperwork, flipping through old sales logs, running back-end reports, he pulled commission summaries and credit score patterns. The numbers didn't lie. The trends were undeniable. Black and Latino clients were more likely to be offered shorter-term loans, lower trade-in values, higher interest rates. Some of the math could be explained. Most of it couldn't. Cambria updated the Whisper files daily. Each file was a blade sharpened with patience. Not for an attack, but for surgery. This wasn't about canceling people. This was about exposing a cancer before it killed what was good. One morning, she caught a brief conversation in the hallway between Devon and Grant. "You see the numbers this quarter?" Devon asked. "Yeah," Grant replied, "up 8%. Told you this crew just needed some balancing." "New girl's still here." "Not for long," Grant said. "She'll either get bored or quit. They always do." Cambria wrote that one down too. They always do. What they didn't know was that she wasn't here to survive them. She was here to outlast them. She began coaching one of the junior sales reps on the side, Jasmine Hill, a sharp but quiet black woman with numbers better than most of her peers. Jasmine had stopped getting top leads recently. Cambria showed her how to redirect clients, how to speak in a way that demanded respect without inviting rebuke. Jasmine caught on fast. Soon her sales picked up. But so did the cold shoulders. The men stopped inviting her to lunch. Rebecca ignored her during meetings. Joey called her the intern, even though she'd been there 6 months. Another file was born. One evening, as Cambria walked past the service department, she heard a mechanic mutter to a coworker, "Too many of them on the floor these days. Feels like affirmative action in a blazer." She didn't pause, just clicked her pen twice. Recording saved. Shaq and Cambria met every Thursday night in that back office now. They barely spoke at those meetings. Just reviewed, logged, prepped. "You ready to drop this?" Shaq asked one night, after hearing a clip where Chad referred to a client as the kind that probably shops with Monopoly money. "Not yet," Cambria said. "The house is still full. I want to wait until they think they're safe." "They don't seem worried." "That's the point." She stared out the window, eyes locked on a security camera screen. On it, Grant was walking across the lot, clipboard in hand, laughing at something on his phone. "They think they're winning," she said. Shaq folded his hands together. "Then they've already lost." And just like that, the silence they depended on became a weapon in the hands of the people they thought would never fight back. Cambria's files weren't just records. They were truth, stitched together by patience, bound by discipline, and soaked in history. The storm wasn't coming. It had already begun. Quiet, relentless, whispered. Big Shaq never needed to raise his voice. His silence said enough. The atmosphere inside the dealership began to change, though not in ways most could point to. It wasn't in the lighting or the layout or the music humming gently through the showroom speakers. It was in the way glances lingered a little too long. In the way footsteps slowed when passing certain doors. In the way conversations dropped when someone noticed they were being heard. Because Shaquille O'Neal had started paying attention. Not just walking the floor, not just standing by the vending machine with a calm smile and a shoulder squeeze. He was reviewing, reading, retracing. And behind the shadows of that dealership, tucked within the glossy branding and the polished tile, was a story that he was no longer willing to ignore. At first, it was subtle. Shaq began requesting certain reports, old sales ledgers, trade-in evaluations, financing packages. The requests weren't sent to his assistant. He asked in person, quietly, directly. No announcement, no pretense. He simply walked up to departments and asked. People smiled and nodded, but they walked away with tension in their shoulders. He wasn't asking for show. He was asking because he knew. He cross-referenced client credit tiers with interest rates. Then he added trade-in values. Then compared which sales rep handled which client, and what kind of car was recommended based on race and age. It was all there. Numbers in black and white. No guesswork. No assumptions. And the numbers did not lie. Black and Latino clients were, on average, offered higher rates than white clients with identical or better credit. Their trade-ins were appraised lower. They were shown fewer premium models. Their documents were more often flagged for verification, delaying approvals that never should have needed second reviews. In short, they were steered, stalled, and shortchanged. Shaq didn't bring it up in meetings. Not yet. Instead, he visited each department late in the day, when people were winding down. He asked questions like a surgeon testing nerves before cutting. He watched the finance director, Nathan Harlan, shift in his seat when asked about internal filters. He noticed how Nathan's language tightened. "We just follow the software," Nathan explained quickly one afternoon. "You know, algorithms based on predictive modeling. It's not about race, it's about risk. Show me the risk model, Shaq said, folding his arms. Nathan blinked. I mean, it's proprietary, integrated in the CRM, but I can pull a snapshot. Shaq nodded. Pull it. When Nathan delivered a basic spreadsheet the next morning, it looked clean. Too clean. Shaq studied it quietly, finger tracing columns. Then he turned the paper over and said, "Where's the raw data?" "What do you mean?" Nathan asked, already nervous. "I want to see the original logs, before filters, before the scoring matrix kicks in." Nathan hesitated, eyes darting. "That'll take time to compile." Shaq just stared at him. The air between them grew dense, the kind that wraps itself around your neck. Shaq didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam the table. He simply stood there, 6'11", still as stone, a wall of presence. His silence didn't ask for respect. It demanded truth. Nathan folded. He promised to get the logs by end of week. Shaq didn't nod. He didn't say thank you. He just walked away. By Thursday, Cambria met him in the back office. "They're squirming," she said, sliding a stack of printouts onto the desk. "They should be," Shaq replied. She watched him scan the documents, tracing numbers with eyes sharp enough to catch patterns most missed. He didn't need to guess who was complicit. The files did the talking. The data painted a picture more damning than any accusation, discrimination hidden inside decimal points. But Shaq knew numbers weren't enough. He called a staff meeting Friday morning. No agenda, no memo, just a quiet message passed around. Shaq wants the whole floor at 10 a.m. sharp. They gathered in the conference room, sales reps, floor managers, finance officers. Some looked nervous, others looked smug. Grant arrived last, sipping from his monogrammed tumbler like it was a social hour. Cambria stood in the back, silent. Shaq stepped up front. No notes, no podium, just him. "I've been looking at the numbers," he said. "Not the sales numbers, not the bonuses, the client data, and I see patterns." The room shifted. Shoulders tightened. Eyes darted. "I see clients of color getting fewer premium offers. I see their trade-ins undervalued. I see interest rates inflated beyond logic. And I see who's selling what to who." Grant let out a soft exhale, masked as a chuckle. Shaq turned to him. "You got something to add?" he asked. Grant straightened. "No disrespect, sir, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. Our sales process is data-driven. We respond to what the client qualifies for. We're not making those choices. The software is." Shaq didn't blink. "You mean the software you enter data into manually?" Grant paused. "That's what I thought," Shaq said, turning back to the group. "You see, when I invested in this place, I thought we were building something different, something honest. But I didn't build this. I built a foundation. You built this." No one spoke. Some of you built it with bias. Some of you let it happen. Some of you didn't care as long as the money came in. But starting today, things change. Devon raised a hand halfway. "With all due respect, sir." Shaq cut him off. "Respect is earned, not assumed. You can save that line." He walked slowly across the room now, pausing near the whiteboard. "Cambria," he said, "pull up the trade-in comparisons." She stepped forward and loaded a projection onto the screen. Names were redacted. Numbers weren't. 3 clients. Same car. Same condition. Same mileage. 1 white, 1 black, 1 Latino. The offer values, $8,000, $6,300, and $5,750. No one could argue the image. "You think this is coincidence?" Shaq asked. The room was still. He clicked to the next slide, loan approvals, then the next assigned sales reps by ethnicity, and then a final slide titled Client Complaints Flagged and Buried. A thin vein pulsed in Shaq's temple. "I'm not here to cancel anyone," he said. "I'm here to clean house. Some of you won't be here next month. Some of you are going to training, and some of you need to start thinking about what kind of human being you want to be when no one's watching." He looked toward Grant, then toward Nathan in the back. "We're not a dealership anymore," Shaq said. "We're a test of who we become when no one's checking, and too many of you have failed." He turned and walked out. He didn't slam the door. He didn't issue threats. He didn't have to. Cambria stayed behind, watched their faces. No one moved. Later that day, Shaq met with Nathan privately. The finance director walked in with papers in hand and excuses on his lips. Shaq didn't let him speak. "You knew," he said. Nathan's jaw twitched. I didn't set the policy. It was always just the way things ran." Shaq stood slowly, walked to the door, closed it gently. "You looked the other way. You got bonuses. You stayed comfortable. You let the system run even when it didn't feel right. Nathan stammered. I didn't mean harm. It wasn't personal. Shaq stepped closer, voice even. It was personal. It's always personal when people leave here feeling small. Nathan looked down. Sweat beaded along his collar. I expect your resignation by end of day, Shaq said. Nathan opened his mouth, closed it again, and left the office without another word. That evening, Cambria handed Shaq a small envelope. Inside was a card, just one line written inside it. Legacy isn't what you build, it's what survives you. Shaq folded it once and put it in his jacket pocket. The shadows of the dealership had begun to lift, and he would never let them return. The paper trail told the truth. The men in ties didn't. The mahogany table stretched longer than it needed to, polished to a mirror sheen, surrounded by high-backed leather chairs that smelled more like legacy than leather. On the far wall, a digital screen looped sales highlights over a muted jazz track. Cambria sat at the end of the boardroom, just 2 seats from the corner. Her trainee name badge still clipped to her blouse like a shield. No one bothered to inspect too closely. She wasn't supposed to be here, not really. But she was invited under the pretense of observing floor performance metrics. No one objected. No one cared. The monthly meeting began with coffee, compliments, and casual indifference. Devin Klein led with his usual bravado, flipping through color-coded slides on the screen. This quarter, we've seen a 7.2% increase in gross profit, largely due to elevated premium inventory performance. He paused for nods. Our customer satisfaction surveys remain above the regional average, and the finance department has exceeded its back-end product targets. Next came Rebecca, pushing a report on customer loyalty data. Repeat visits are up, our digital targeting campaign is converting leads faster than projected, and we're seeing traction in the luxury SUV segment. Cambria listened carefully, noting the omissions. No mention of the dozen unresolved complaints. No talk about the error that cost a black couple their pre-approval status. No reference to the interest rate inconsistencies. No mention of the financing patterns she and Shaq had spent 2 weeks dissecting line by line. Grant followed with his signature smooth delivery. His navy tie perfectly knotted. Voice just humble enough to sell the idea of teamwork. I'd also like to highlight the sales team's adaptability. We've made process shifts to better align with buyer expectations. I've personally taken initiative to coach some of our newer reps. Make sure they understand how to engage each kind of customer. Each kind. Cambria's pen tapped once against her notepad. Subtle. Intentional. The room responded as expected. Soft laughs, satisfied hums of agreement. A gray-haired investor named Mr. Callahan leaned forward with a grin. Grant here's a closer. Always has been. Knows how to make a deal walk off the lot before it hits lunch. Cambria scanned the room. 12 people. 10 white men, 1 white woman, and Shaquille O'Neal, sitting near the head of the table, arms crossed, silent. His face was unreadable, but Cambria had spent enough time watching him watch other people to recognize what was simmering beneath the stillness. Then came the finance director's update. Not Nathan Harlan. He'd resigned quietly 2 days prior. His assistant, a skittish man named Will Darnell, stood in his place. We're in the process of revalidating our approval processes, Will said, visibly sweating. Still maintaining margins. Some data inconsistencies have come up, but we're investigating. Grant jumped in smoothly. Voice dipped in calm dismissal. We've had some noise around credit screening, but as we've said before, it's based on algorithmic logic, nothing discriminatory. Cambria caught Shaq's eyes for a moment. His silence now felt sharper than shouting. The conversation shifted. More pie charts, more spin. Then someone asked, "Any concerns from the floor?" Before anyone could answer, Cambria spoke softly, but without hesitation. "I have a few." The room looked her way, most with a kind of polite confusion, like they'd just noticed a chair talking. Grant smiled, condescending. "Sure, Bree, go ahead." She stood slowly, reached into her bag and placed a thick folder on the table. "This is a sample of 3 weeks' worth of floor activity. Sales logs, finance documents, trade-in evaluations, audio transcripts." The room stiffened. Inside, you'll find consistent patterns that show how customers of color are disproportionately offered lower trade-in values, higher interest rates, and less favorable financing terms. Some deals were rerouted mid-process with no explanation. Some customers never even received callbacks after initial inquiries. Devin interrupted with a cough. "Now hold on." Shaq raised a single finger. The room went dead quiet. He didn't even look at Devin. Just said, "Let her finish." Cambria turned to the board again. "In those files, you'll find direct quotes. Employees referring to black clients as credit risks before reviewing their applications. Minority clients assigned to lower-performing reps based on appearance. Clients with excellent credit being denied on the basis of system errors. She paused. It's not occasional, it's operational. Rebecca leaned forward. These are serious accusations. They're not accusations, Cambria replied, calm as steel. They're facts. Grant chuckled, but it didn't land. With all due respect, Bree, you're a trainee. Maybe some of the metrics just look off because you're not used to the back-end logic. It's easy to misinterpret data when you don't see the whole picture. Shaq moved for the first time, sat forward, palms on the table. She's not a trainee, he said. She's the CEO. Silence. Then the room cracked open with the sound of reality slamming in. Shaq let the silence settle. Then he said, Cambria Steele, majority owner. I brought her in because I started hearing whispers. You all smiled at her, ignored her, called her sweetheart. And while you were doing that, she was building a case. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. Shaq stood slowly now, looked around the table like he was seeing these men for the first time.
I thought loyalty would be enough. I thought investing in you meant you'd invest in people. But you built something crooked. You dressed it up real pretty. Called it sales strategy, client filtering, standard protocol. But you were redlining in a showroom.
Callahan cleared his throat, trying to recover control. Now Shaq, let's not blow this out of proportion. It is the proportion, Shaq said. This isn't one bad apple, it's a pattern. That folder right there, it's your mirror, and it's ugly. He turned to Grant. You ever think how many people walked out of here feeling like they didn't belong? Like they were too black, too poor, too different to drive off in something nice? Grant opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Shaq continued. You ever sell someone a car knowing you gave them the worst deal in the building just 'cause you could? You ever see a single mom's eyes when you tell her the APR jumped because of some system flag? No one moved. I have, Shaq said. I've seen it. I've heard the stories. But now, he looked at Cambria. We're making changes. Effective immediately. He turned to the room. Some of you will be asked to step down. Some of you are under formal review. And this board? Restructuring starts today. A voice from the far end asked weakly. And the press? Shaq didn't miss a beat. They'll know what we tell them. We're owning this. No spinning. No cover-ups. We clean house, or the house collapses. Cambria stepped forward, adding one final note. We're not asking for applause. We're demanding accountability. This isn't about bad PR. It's about decency. And if that's too much to ask, you're in the wrong room. The meeting ended without claps, without smiles. Just chairs scraping and exits made with lowered eyes. Shaq and Cambria remained. They think this is the fire, he said quietly. It's just the match, she replied. And they both knew this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of something far more honest. A man at his most dangerous is one who thinks he's untouchable. The problem with predators who've never been caught is they start mistaking the silence for permission. Grant Dillard walked the floor now with the swagger of a man who thought he'd passed every test that mattered. He'd survived the staff reshuffle, dodged every red flag Shaq and Cambria had quietly waved under the radar, and still stood tall in meetings with reports that painted him as indispensable. And with Nathan gone and some of the others shaken, he had no doubt who the dealership needed most. Him. He didn't notice how quiet Cambria had gotten. Or maybe he did, and he thought it was a good sign, thought she'd been put in her place. A harmless trainee after all. He saw her in the corners of meetings, behind desks, watching but not speaking, scribbling notes he assumed went nowhere. Grant had always been good at reading rooms, but terrible at reading women who didn't flatter him. It was late Tuesday afternoon when Raymond Cutler strolled back in, all smug charm and inherited hate. The Confederate buckle still hugged his waist. A fresh cigar wrapped in plastic poked from his vest pocket, and his voice rang loud like an announcement no one wanted, but everyone heard. Where's my guy? Grant, the man who knows real customers. Grant met him near the back with a grin. Mr. Cutler, just the man I wanted to see. Got that Escalade polished and waiting. Raymond chuckled. Ain't it nice when someone delivers? World's full of soft service now, no grit. Glad to see a dealership still run by people with spine. The irony tasted like rust in the air. They stood near the inventory bay, now voices carrying into the hallway like they owned it. Grant leaned in slightly. You remember that girl from last time? The trainee? Raymond smirked. What? The janitor? Grant laughed. Nah. She's technically floor staff. Still in training. Don't know much, but I'm trying to school her. She's green. You can tell. Raymond snorted. Raised on government cheese, probably. She got that look. The trying real hard to be something she ain't look. They both laughed. Loud, carefree, confident. What they didn't see was Leroy, 2 doors down in the supply room, holding a box of printer paper frozen in his hands. His jaw was tight, his back stiff, but he said nothing, just stood still, eyes closed, letting the poison pass through him like it always had. And what they also didn't see, what they never even imagined, was Cambria, tucked quietly behind the service hallway divider, her phone recording every syllable, her fingers steady, her eyes sharp and wide open. She didn't cry, not yet. She just pressed stop, saved the file, and labeled it Cutler Dillard Session 3 Wave. That night, the dealership emptied early. Shaq came in late, as he often did now, entering through the back where no one would see him. The lights in the main offices were off, but the back corner room glowed dimly. Cambria was already there, laptop open, headphones resting beside her, eyes on the screen. He didn't ask, just sat down beside her. She slid the laptop toward him and hit play. They listened together. Raymond's voice first, ugly and sharp, then Grant's voice, confident, mocking. The laughter followed, that sound, that ease. At the 30-second mark, Shaq leaned back and exhaled hard. At the 1-minute mark, his eyes closed. By the end, he hadn't moved. Cambria sat still. When the clip ended, silence reclaimed the room. And then, for the first time in 10 years, Shaquille O'Neal wiped at his eyes. No breakdown, no sobbing, just the kind of silent, invisible grief that folds itself into a man's spine and stays there. I wasn't crying for me, he whispered finally. I was crying for every brother and sister who walked in here proud, ready, excited, who got laughed at the minute they turned their back. Cambria nodded once. They don't think we belong in glass offices, she said, or behind signature lines, or near 6-figure sales tags. They think we're footnotes. Decor. Shaq stood up slowly, his breath deepening. Not tomorrow. You sure? He turned, voice steady. It's time. The next morning, no one saw it coming. Cambria entered the dealership at 8:58 a.m., not in her modest blouse and flats, but in a fitted black blazer over a pearl gray sheath dress. Heels clicked with purpose, hair styled sharp, no clipboard, no badge. She didn't smile when she walked past the front desk. She didn't greet anyone on the floor. She walked straight into the main office wing and turned into the glass conference room, without a word. Devin was already inside prepping a monthly sales rundown. Chad hovered over the coffee counter. Grant was at the far end, running numbers on his tablet. He glanced up, about to crack a smile, then froze. Good morning, Cambria said, loud enough to slice through the room. They looked up like students caught whispering. The moment stretched. I'm Cambria Steele, she said, CEO of this dealership. I've been here for the last 3 weeks. Grant went still. Devin blinked. Chad dropped a stir stick. I've watched, listened, recorded. I know who you are when no one's looking. The tension exploded in silence. Not a word, not a shuffle. Only wide eyes and a few gulps swallowed too loudly. Cambria stepped forward. For 3 weeks, I stood in this building while you talked about me, like I was beneath you, like I didn't belong, like I wasn't worth your professionalism. She turned to Grant. You laughed with a client while he insulted me. You said I was being trained. You said I was green. You said I didn't know real business. Grant tried to speak, but no sound emerged. Cambria opened a folder, laid a printed transcript on the table. You don't need to say a word. You already did. Shaq walked in then, silent, suit pressed, expression cold. Cambria stepped aside. Shaq looked around the room. Slowly. I gave you my trust, he said. My investment, my name. And you turned it into a playground where ignorance gets commission and dignity gets ignored. He turned to Devin. You let it happen. To Chad, you joined the laughter. To Grant, you let it. No one moved. Then Cambria added, as of this moment, Mr. Dillard is suspended pending formal review. A full audit of his deals has already begun. Mr. Klein, your oversight is under legal evaluation. And Mr. Whitmer, your internal conduct file has been reopened. A gasp. No one said it, but the fear hung thick. Legal. Shaq leaned on the table. Let me be clear. This is not a witch hunt. This is a reckoning. Cambria continued. We will be publishing a public transparency report. No PR filter. No sugarcoating. Every customer complaint will be documented. Every policy failure addressed. Every bias recorded. Grant found his voice. You're destroying this place. No, Cambria said, calm. We're finally building it. The room emptied with slow feet. No shouting. Just shame. Outside, the dealership looked the same. Sunlight gleamed off the Escalade. Music still played from the speakers. But inside, something irreversible had shifted. Respect. Accountability. And the end of comfort without consequence. They fired bullets of charm. She came armored with truth. The morning after Cambria's revelation moved through the dealership like a current through copper. No emails were sent. No staff-wide memos were issued. But the air buzzed with rumor and caution. A shift that couldn't be tracked on paper but was obvious in every glance and every silence. It wasn't just discomfort. It was the uncomfortable realization that the walls had been listening, and the woman they underestimated had been recording everything. Grant arrived later than usual, wearing a gray pinstripe suit that looked more like armor than fashion. The lapels were too stiff, the confidence in his step a bit too forced. He smiled at the front desk, but Whitney didn't smile back. He nodded to Devon, who barely raised his coffee. He passed Cambria near the executive hallway and offered a low, muttered morning, but she didn't return it. Her silence was more decisive than any reprimand. He turned toward the main conference room and froze. Raymond Cutler was already there, sitting casually in one of the leather chairs, legs crossed, belt buckle shining with that same Confederate emblem, face smug with entitlement. He had arrived unannounced, of course, which wasn't unusual for him. But today, his presence was different, sharper, more dangerous. "Grant," Raymond said, arms wide like they were old war buddies, "I came in to finish up that Escalade deal, and to talk to someone about that little misunderstanding from last time." Grant swallowed, then nodded, forcing a grin. "Of course, Mr. Cutler, we'll sort this out right away." Raymond lowered his voice, although not enough. "That girl you've got on the floor? Cam something? I want to make it clear, I don't take kindly to being handled like that. She disrespected me." From behind the tinted glass office door, Shaq leaned slightly forward. Cambria entered the room without warning, her heels clipping like punctuation on tile. She wasn't in the mood for preamble. She didn't even acknowledge Grant's startled shift. Her eyes went straight to Raymond. "I'm Cambria Steele," she said, calm as steel. "And I didn't disrespect you, I just didn't make myself small for you." Raymond chuckled. "Well now, I don't know what kind of tone that is." She interrupted. "The kind of tone that responds to racism without apology." Raymond's face twitched. "I've been a loyal customer here for years. And loyalty doesn't excuse ignorance," she replied. Raymond looked at Grant. "You gonna let her talk to me like that?" Grant opened his mouth, but before he could speak, a slow knock echoed from the hallway. Shaq stepped into the room. Every movement he made was measured, intentional. He didn't rush, he didn't demand. He simply existed, and that was more than enough. Raymond looked him over and forced a half smile. "Now I remember. You're the man who owns the place. Played ball, right?" Shaq's expression didn't change. "I remember you too." "Good. Then let's talk business." Shaq shook his head once. "There won't be any business." Raymond stiffened. "Excuse me?" "You're not buying anything here," Shaq said. "Not today. Not ever." Grant stood abruptly. "Hold on. We can't just—" "You can," Cambria cut in. "And you will." Shaq turned to Raymond. "This dealership will never serve a man who disrespects women or black excellence. You weren't just rude. You were vile. You laughed at people you thought had no power. And that kind of customer isn't welcome here." Raymond's voice dropped an octave, trying to threaten with politeness. "I could take this up with corporate. There are consequences to treating clients this way." Shaq tilted his head. "You are free to do that. But first, let me be clear about the consequence of staying." Cambria opened a folder and laid it flat on the table in front of Raymond. Printed transcripts, audio timestamps, screenshots. It was all there. His words unfiltered, every slur coated in sarcasm, every assumption soaked in entitlement. "You bragged about knowing the owner," she said, stepping closer. "Now you know the truth." Raymond's face darkened. He tried to stand, then thought better of it. His pride had nowhere to go, so it sat there in his throat, choking on its own surprise. Security arrived quietly. Not with force, just presence. Enough for Raymond to understand he had one option to leave. He stood slowly, brushing his coat like dust had settled there. "You people," he muttered, voice low and sour, "are ruining everything." Shaq stepped forward one final time. "No, we're rebuilding it." Raymond turned and walked out. The door closed behind him, like a chapter slamming shut. Grant remained frozen in place, color drained from his face. He looked around the room as if trying to find the camera he was certain had to be filming this. This couldn't be real. But it was. Cambria turned to him. "You let him speak for you."
I didn't know.
You didn't care to know. Grant swallowed hard. You can't just erase years of work I've done here. Cambria stepped closer. You erased every client who didn't fit your script. Every handshake given to someone with an accent. Every customer dismissed with a smile. Shaq crossed his arms. You trained this culture. You celebrated it. But the party's over. The staff outside the conference room didn't pretend not to watch. They stood quietly, coffee cups held still, glances exchanged. Everyone knew what was happening, even if it wasn't printed in the HR handbook. Shaq nodded to Cambria. She lifted another document. This is your formal notice. You're suspended pending termination review. You'll be escorted out today. You may submit a written response to the board, but your access ends now. Grant looked between them. He opened his mouth, tried again, then turned and walked out. No more smiles. No more clever lines. Just the sound of a man learning too late that confidence built on cruelty is a house made of matchsticks. Cambria exhaled, the room finally feeling wide enough to breathe. Shaq placed a hand on her shoulder. You didn't just survive them, he said. You dismantled them. She looked up at him, her voice steady but low. And now we build. Outside, the sun gleamed across the showroom floor like it had been waiting for this moment. For the first time in a long time, truth stood at the front of the dealership. And nobody was going to move it. When you burn the rot, the real roots have room to grow. Change didn't come quietly. It came like smoke from under a sealed door. Slow at first, then sudden, impossible to ignore, unmistakably consuming. The Monday after Raymond Cutler was removed from the building, and Grant Dillard was walked off the floor under suspension. The dealership didn't just feel different, it sounded different. The voices were lower, the jokes were gone. The laughter that echoed for all the wrong reasons had been replaced by whispers of uncertainty, fear, and for some, hope. Cambria stood at the center of it all, not looking for control, but restoring clarity. Her office, once mistaken for a cubicle, now held its rightful place at the head of the executive wing. The trainee badge had long since disappeared, replaced by a golden plaque outside her door. Cambria Steele, Chief Executive Officer. No fanfare, no unveiling ceremony. Just the truth finally visible. By noon, 3 more resignation letters had been delivered to HR. Devin Klein's name was the first typed at the top of the page. He left without a word, bypassing the usual dramatic exits. Rebecca followed, her tone brittle in her goodbye email. She cited creative differences with leadership. Behind closed doors, it was whispered that she feared what might come out next. 2 others were let go by the end of the week. Employees whose involvement had been logged in the whisper files. Cambria didn't fire anyone for gossip or discomfort. She relied on evidence, audio, data, pattern analysis. Every decision was traceable, justifiable and fair, but firm. The dealership lost 8 people in 7 business days, and it gained something else: honesty. Shaq made it clear from that point on he would personally oversee every new hire. Every resume crossed his desk. Every interview was recorded. He sat in on panel evaluations and asked questions no one else had dared before. What does equity mean to you? Tell me about a time you challenged bias, yours or someone else's. Why do you want to sell here? Cambria introduced a full-spectrum diversity audit. External consultants brought in to examine everything from recruiting channels to loan approval algorithms. Bias was no longer the unspeakable elephant in the room. It had a name, and it was being evicted. Within days, word got out. Not just to the clients or to the automotive community, but to the public. Local media caught wind of the shakeup. The headline was measured but powerful. CEO goes undercover to expose racism at her own dealership. Now the staff is being rebuilt from the ground up. The story spread, at first locally, then across automotive forums. Then it hit the national circuit. Cambria didn't give interviews. She refused talk shows, declined documentaries. Her voice had already been used in the one place that mattered, the recordings. She didn't need to explain herself to cameras. Her mission was internal. Shaq, on the other hand, gave one interview, just one. It aired on a Sunday morning segment called Business Unfiltered. When the reporter asked why he didn't step in earlier, he answered with unflinching honesty. Because I thought being a silent owner meant I was being respectful. I thought giving people room was empowerment. Turns out, I gave the wrong people freedom to rot the place from the inside. That's on me. But I'm fixing it now. The internet buzzed. Some praised him. Some criticized. Some said he overreacted. Others said it was just one business and wouldn't change the system. Cambria heard it all. But she never responded. Because she wasn't chasing a headline. She was chasing a standard. The customers returned in waves. Some out of curiosity, others out of quiet support. One black couple came in on a Saturday afternoon with their teenage daughter. They walked the floor for over an hour. No one pushed them. No one ignored them. They asked questions, sat in 2 models, and left with a brochure and a smile. Before they exited, the father turned and said, "We stopped coming here 5 years ago. But we heard things changed, and we see it now." Shaq stood near the lot entrance and nodded once. "Thank you for coming back," he said. But not everyone responded with dignity. A thick envelope arrived one Friday morning, hand-delivered by a courier. Inside, a formal lawsuit. Plaintiff, Raymond Elias Cutler. Claim, defamation of character, racial discrimination, unlawful denial of service. Allegation, targeted humiliation based on political beliefs and heritage identity. Cambria read it once, then again. She didn't react. She just closed the folder and handed it to Shaq. He didn't blink. So it begins. Raymond's lawyers made statements in the press, called the dealership hostile toward traditional values, accused the leadership of personal vendettas, claimed that Raymond had known the previous management for decades and was treated unfairly under new leadership, pushing a cultural agenda. Cambria remained silent. But what followed spoke volumes. Within days, Cambria's legal team filed their response, 35 pages of documentation, timestamps, transcripts, staff witness statements, and the original recordings. The audio of Raymond's laughter, his casual use of stereotypes, his direct insults. The evidence wasn't circumstantial, it was surgical. The case was brought before a local circuit judge. The courtroom was filled, not because it was high profile, but because people wanted to see how truth held up against pride. Raymond's attorney argued first. They painted Cambria as radical, framed the incident as a misunderstanding, tried to twist the denial of sale as a political attack. Then Cambria's team played the recording. There was no need for voiceover. The courtroom sat in silence as Raymond's voice echoed. She was probably raised on government cheese. Ain't got time for cleaning staff. Y'all still give discounts to folks like us, right? The judge paused after the final clip. She leaned forward, removed her glasses, and stared at Raymond. "You call this a misunderstanding?" she asked. Raymond shifted in his seat. The judge turned to his lawyer. "You're wasting the court's time." She dismissed the case immediately, but she didn't stop there. "I suggest the plaintiff take a hard look at what defamation truly means. Because in this court, truth is not defamatory. It's foundational." Outside, reporters waited. Cambria walked straight through the crowd without comment. One reporter yelled, "Do you feel vindicated?" She didn't turn around, just answered, "I feel focused." The dealership received hundreds of messages over the next week. Some hateful, some grateful. One email read, "I've never bought a car from your dealership, but my daughter just got her first job in sales, and I'm glad people like you exist." Shaq printed it and framed it on the back wall of his office. Change hadn't been easy. It had scorched the floor, singed the corners, cracked the ceiling, but it had cleared the air, and now something real could grow. No hashtags. No slogans. Just truth and the quiet, slow rebuilding of something worthy. And that, Cambria knew, was how revolutions began. Not with shouting, with fire. They didn't just sell cars, they sold hope. The camera didn't open on chrome, or engines, or smiling salesmen shaking hands over paperwork. It didn't start with polished footage of happy couples sliding into pristine SUVs. It began with silence. Then the sound of footsteps. 2 pairs, walking side by side down the center aisle of the dealership showroom. Shaquille O'Neal and Cambria Steele. There were no titles on the screen, no dramatic music. Just them, walking slowly between rows of vehicles. No one smiled, no one posed. It felt like a documentary, raw, unscripted, intentional. And then Cambria's voice entered. "This isn't just a dealership. It's a space where all people belong." That wasn't always true. But now it's our mission. It wasn't the commercial anyone expected, not even internally. The original script, drafted by the dealership's longtime PR agency, had been standard fluff buzzwords, grins, a few token testimonials about top service and great deals. Cambria shut it down after reading the first paragraph. "We're not selling cars," she said. "We're selling trust. Let's act like it." They hired a new production team. Local, diverse, quiet professionals who didn't push a vision but instead asked questions. They spent 2 weeks on site, listening, filming, interviewing, never directing, just documenting. They interviewed Leroy Jackson, who had been working as the dealership janitor for over a decade. He spoke slowly, one hand gripping his mop handle as he stared just off camera.
"I seen a lot in this place,"
he said. But what matters is who you see when nobody else is looking. And I saw Cambria when no one else did. Cut to Jasmine Hill, junior sales rep, standing near the showroom window. Before the changes, I used to wonder why I never got certain leads, she said. Now I know. But now I also know that someone's watching. Someone cares. That makes all the difference. Another scene showed Naomi Clark, a single mother who worked in accounting. She looked directly into the lens. I didn't think I belonged in corporate, she said. I didn't think people like me were supposed to have a voice. Cambria changed that. She didn't just open the door, she handed us the key. Then came a montage. Quick, simple shots. Shaq walking the lot with Leroy, helping hose down the walkway. Cambria seated at a round table with 3 new interns, laughing over coffee. A black father helping his daughter test drive a crossover. A white woman shaking hands with a Latino finance rep. A team of employees in the break room, not segregated by race or role, but mixed connected. Then, the camera pulled back for one wide shot. The dealership at dusk, the sun setting behind the giant dealership sign. The voiceover returned. We didn't just fix a company. We started something new, where trust drives everything. No background music, no fancy slogans. Just one closing statement. Steele O'Neal Motors, where all roads begin with respect. The ad aired once, Sunday evening, during a primetime NFL broadcast. Shaq paid for the spot himself. It lasted 90 seconds. It felt like a movement. By Monday morning, the internet exploded. Hashtags formed instantly. Nut, this is how you lead. Cambria was watching. O'Neal did it right. Clips of Leroy's voice were remixed into spoken word videos. Jasmine's soundbite went viral on LinkedIn. The dealership's website crashed twice in 24 hours. National news picked it up. Former NBA star and black woman CEO flipped dealership culture on its head. From Undercover to Unshakable, the story of Cambria Steele. Can one commercial start a real revolution? Requests for interviews flooded in. CNN. Good Morning America. Business Insider. Cambria declined everyone. I'm not the story, she said. The truth is. Shaq, meanwhile, was approached by ESPN for a special feature. He smiled, shook hands, and told them the same thing. Cambria's the story. I just gave her the court. But the media wouldn't stop, so the dealership put out one final press release. We've said all we needed to say. Now we're going to show it. The real change happened on the lot. A former client who hadn't been back in 4 years returned with his teenage son. They asked about trade-ins. They left with a hybrid and 2 firm handshakes. A woman from out of state emailed asking if she could fly in just to buy a car. I want to support a place that actually believes in equity, she wrote. Job applications soared, not just from salespeople, but from finance professionals, marketing experts, and automotive techs who said they were tired of the way normal business operated. Cambria launched a hiring initiative specifically for underserved applicants. Not quotas, just outreach, real conversations, transparent hiring practices. Inside the dealership, the staff changed, the culture changed. People started asking questions out loud that used to live only in whispered complaints. Team meetings included uncomfortable discussions, but necessary ones. One week, an employee stood up and asked, "How do we make sure this doesn't fade when the spotlight does?" Cambria answered without hesitation, by acting like the spotlight never mattered. It wasn't all applause. There were angry calls. One former employee posted a bitter rant online. A few customers boycotted. A local columnist criticized the commercial as woke marketing and emotional manipulation. Shaq didn't respond. Cambria only said, "You can't fix what you refuse to see." Every time backlash came, support overwhelmed it. Clients walked in and said, "We saw the commercial," and they said it with pride, with gratitude. Because it wasn't just about the cars. It was about the feeling that someone was finally cleaning the house and planting something honest in the soil. It was Leroy's voice cracking when he thanked Shaq for believing in the janitor. It was Naomi finally being promoted to lead accountant. It was Jasmine mentoring 3 interns from the same background she came from. It was Cambria walking the floor every day, knowing she no longer needed to hide her voice. And it was Shaq, giant, quiet, present, reminding everyone that silence wasn't power. Listening was. The commercial didn't win any awards, but it changed the heartbeat of a business, of a community. It didn't sell cars. It sold hope. They came to buy cars. They left changed. The dealership no longer hummed with rehearsed lines or hollow laughter. It breathed now, moved with rhythm. The energy wasn't manufactured. It was lived, real. The chrome still gleamed under the sunlight, The floors were still buffed to a showroom sheen, but something beneath the surface had shifted. The difference wasn't cosmetic, it was cultural, and it showed in every corner. 3 months had passed since the storm. Raymond's lawsuit was dismissed, since the commercial aired, since the false smiles had been replaced by something more honest. The headlines had cooled. The internet moved on, as it always does. But what remained was what mattered. The transformation wasn't about branding. It was about being. Cambria made sure of that. She didn't issue weekly memos or hover in meetings. She set systems in motion, quiet, purposeful shifts that spoke louder than any slogan. The staff was retrained from the ground up, not with some off-the-shelf corporate seminar, but with lived dialogue. Cambria brought in educators, equity consultants, and former clients to speak. She created a platform, not for punishment but for understanding. It wasn't about shaming the past, it was about acknowledging it. The sales team looked different now, not just racially, but in how they moved, how they listened. The aggressive closers were gone, replaced by people who understood that selling something expensive didn't mean selling out someone's dignity. There were more women on the floor now, more Black and Latino professionals, more empathy, more eye contact. Shaq had refused to take a formal title, even after Cambria offered him the option of returning to a leadership role on paper. He laughed, as he always did, gently, and said, "My job is still what it was on day one, watching, building, protecting. I just didn't know how bad the walls had gotten. Now I do." Every morning, he walked the floor. Not for optics, not for praise. He walked it to be among them. He greeted customers, asked employees what they needed, cracked jokes with interns. He wasn't the shadow behind the curtain anymore. He was the floor itself, solid, grounding, ever present. In Cambria's office, framed on the back wall behind her desk, was the old trainee badge. Still laminated, edges slightly scuffed, the name printed in blocky, generic font, Bree S. She kept it as a reminder, not of humiliation, but of strategy, of endurance, of what it meant to be underestimated, and to turn that into power. When people asked her what her proudest moment was in the whole ordeal, she never pointed to the commercial, or the lawsuit, or even the sweeping policy changes. She always looked back at that badge and said, "The day they forgot to look up when they looked at me." One morning in late spring, a young Black woman stepped through the showroom doors. Early 20s, wearing jeans and a sunflower yellow cardigan. She looked nervous, but not fragile. Her name was Naya. She walked slowly around the showroom, pausing beside a cherry red SUV, fingers brushing lightly against the door handle. A junior sales rep approached, greeted her warmly, answered her questions without condescension. He offered her water, asked what she was looking for, not what she could afford, but what she wanted. Cambria happened to be walking by. She paused. Something about the girl's posture, the way her eyes moved, curious, alert, cautious. The young woman turned. They made eye contact. Nia hesitated, then said, Are you the one from the commercial?" Cambria smiled softly. "That's me." Nia stepped closer. "You don't know me, but I watched that video with my mom." She cried. "I never thought a place like this would feel like somewhere I'd be seen." Cambria didn't say anything right away. She stepped forward, extended her hand. "What's your name?" "Nia." "Well, Naya," Cambria said, shaking her hand firmly. "We're glad you're here." They stood for a moment, silent, but full. That's how the story ended. Not with applause, not with confetti or viral praise, but with a handshake between two Black women, one who had broken through, and one who had just stepped in, one who once stood invisible among executives, and one who no longer had to question her place. They walked together toward the SUV, the sunlight catching their reflections in the glass. Behind them, the showroom moved, sales happening, conversations flowing, real trust being built. Not because someone said it should be, but because someone fought for it. Cambria had once said this wasn't about selling cars. It never had been. It was about selling space, trust, dignity. And dignity, she now knew, had no price tag. If this story moved you, don't just remember it, talk about it. Share it at the dinner table, in the boardroom, on the showroom floor. Let it challenge how you see power, bias, and what leadership really looks like. Change doesn't start with permission. It starts when you decide silence is no longer an option.